Welcome to the Family Banking Show with your hosts Rob, Derek, and John, where we dive into the world of the infinite banking concept and discuss personal banking strategies to secure your legacy and build generational wealth. We're glad you're here, and we hope this episode serves you well.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Family Banking Show. We're your hosts, Derek, Rob, and John. Guys, how's it going this week?
Good. We are first week of October in Minnesota, and it's hot today. It almost hit 80 today.
And windy.
And this week, Monday. It's a rite of passage. Got the pontoon taken out of the lake.
Oh, sad day.
Yep, put away for storage. So means winter's right around the corner.
I'm trying to keep a positive attitude about winter. I'm still new to Minnesota. This will be my second winter, and it's gonna be great. I promise.
Especially after last winter, that's you hit one of the mildest winters in recorded history.
Yeah, El Nino, but I'm looking forward to it.
When you're ready to go ice fishing or play some pond hockey or eat lutefisk or whatever Minnesotans do in the wintertime, you let me know.
Yeah,
At least that's what us Swedes and Germans do up here in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, it seems like it's just finding an excuse to be freezing and try to enjoy it. So,
yep.
Yeah, well, in my area, the leaves are starting to change, believe it or not. So I know I'm a little further north than you guys. So give it another week or so, and you might be noticing leaves coming off the trees pretty soon, which is beautiful. It's incredible, the colors right now. Minnesota, I believe, has some of the best colors in the whole country during this time of year. So if you're somebody who's interested in visiting our lovely state, be sure to head up to the North Shore if you can, because right now those colors are popping.
Yeah, it's beautiful up there.
Guys, this week we're obviously still continuing in our series on Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. We are on page 75 and following. We're coming towards the tail end of the book, and Nelson has some thoughts on education, specifically college or higher education. To start off the conversation, I'll just kind of read the hot take here. One of his quotes from the book says, "First of all, I have a distinct feeling that a college degree is extremely overrated in its value." And even to this day, I think probably people would say is, wow, you're paying how much for your college this year? Or, man, it went up again. Or, how am I going to afford college for my kids because it's just so expensive? I mean, it's very easy that somebody could be paying $20, $30, maybe even $40,000 a year towards their tuition, room and board expenses. And hence why so many college graduates are up to their neck in debt. Guys, what's your take on education? Is it something that should be valued? How do you justify maybe some of these expenses that come along with education? And what advice would you give our listeners?
Well, I'll start off by saying, I think, so my background is engineering, mechanical engineering. And when I was in college, I would honestly say I felt like it was a pretty good value in terms of what the tuition cost versus like what your salary would be. And it's just skyrocketed since then. So I think, it's a harder case to make. I think you really have to, especially if you are a college student or high schooler and you don't really know what you want to do, that might be a good opportunity to maybe not rush into getting into debt in going into school if you don't quite know exactly like what you want to do and what you want to learn and achieve. I would just say it's worth, up until I'd say relatively recently, it was just pretty much assumed, you got out of high school, you're right into college. That's just the way it worked. But once the college started getting so expensive, and the return on investment started to become a little questionable. People have started to, I'd say, wonder about the value proposition. And I think it's fair to look at it and with a critical eye and, really kind of think about, is it worth getting that debt up front for something that you might not really enjoy? And, talk through it and think through it.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is another part of the book that I think Nelson does a really good job of, at the very least, causing us to question the default structure.
Right.
Right. For me, growing up, there was no question that the right path was to graduate high school and go straight to college.
Right.
Like, to even question that would have been unthinkable at the time. Like, nobody I knew
Right.
thought there was a better way ahead. And then you just kind of figured out your path while you're in college. And, I went to a military academy, and I believed in college so much that I was willing to commit 5 years of active duty service in the Navy, which I have no regrets about, and I definitely felt that call to serve. But one of the primary driving factors for me was a free education, on the front end, and knowing that on the back end, like, sure, there'd be no debt, but it would be a very difficult, and it was a very difficult 5 years of active duty. So my experience is maybe a little bit different, but very similar in that you're obligating yourself to something maybe you don't even know exactly what you're getting into. So to just be able to question that, like, especially if you're in high school or you're a parent raising your children and thinking about college, Nelson is an unconventional thinker, and he questions the default structures. And I think that's important with whatever we're doing. Should I just store my money in a savings account? Let me just question that. Let me just step back and at least understand what the options are. And he's doing the same with college, and particularly understanding the financial value that it can bring compared to starting your own banking business, right? With the same dollars that you would have used for your education into something that can be long-term profitable.
Mm-hmm.
One more thing I'll add is just, the purpose of life is not to just make as much money as possible. I don't think any of us believe that, right? And so saying that you can just use the same money that you would for college for your own banking business is great, right? But the caveat to that is, so long as we're following, our calling and purpose in life, and if college actually does meet that criteria and you want to become a doctor and it requires specialized training, then all power to you. But lots of people just go in with generic goals in mind that maybe don't actually meet the value of the financial cost.
Yeah, I want to talk about my education background because I've been in school from age 5 to probably age 25, just with the amount of secondary education that I had even after high school. But so, growing up, my parents and the way that they raised us, we didn't really think unconventionally when it came to that. It was always kind of set in stone that, yeah, you're going to go to college or military, or you're going to move out. Those were your options. Thankfully, my parents allowed me to do a gap year, which now that I think about it, I hated it, but it was also really good because it caused me to think like, how am I going to afford what I wanted to do? The school that I had set my eyes on was a private Christian school in St. Paul, and it was crazy expensive. Thankfully, I didn't go there, and I didn't end up with hundreds of thousands in debt. Not just tens of thousands, but over $100,000 of debt.
Wow.
The other thing my parents did is they didn't help us pay for school. If you wanted to go, you were going to do it on your own dime, because that was their insurance policy that I wasn't going to fail or flunk out. It was basically, I'm not going to pay for that because I know that you're not going to treat it with the same level of respect and attention that you would if it was your own dollars going to pay for your tuition. And then my first undergrad degree, was at a still a private Christian school, but in Chicago. And thankfully that school was tuition paid. It was all donor based. So donors would give money to the school, which would then pay the tuition of the students. So the students arguably only had to come out of pocket for their room and board.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it was great. I graduated with $3,000 in debt.
Wow.
Nice.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it's great for those who are going into pastoral or church ministry because you weren't, like I said, you weren't tens or even hundreds of $1,000s in debt. But then I decided to go back to school and change degrees and majors and all sorts of things and added more debt onto my name, and then got married and added even more debt onto my name. But, looking back on it, I don't have regrets about my education. The schools that I chose to go to taught me how to think and to think critically, not just about my career path, but just like look broadly at like what's going on in the world and society and culture, and how do you think biblically about those things, which is super valuable for a young 20-year-old. But that's the difference between like the education you get maybe in a public school in your teen years is they're trying to get you through a system. They're trying to get you to a point where you can graduate, where you can pass a test and say, yes, this person knows enough to graduate. Whereas the training that I had, the schooling that I had, taught you how to think and think critically and formulate your ideas and give a defense of why you think certain things. It's so different than the training that you'd get in your high school or middle school years. So to that regard, like I still think that type of education is incredibly valuable. And I think that's what Nelson does believe is valuable about education. But if you're going to college just to get the certification, I think that's where he has troubles with like, well, is that really valuable? Is your dollar really the most efficient that way? Or could we do something else with your dollar? Which is why, as John has mentioned, he says, well, what if you started your own banking system and started loaning that money out to others and generating return off of those dollars? Guys, just give me your take on, what type of learning should somebody pursue? And is it just for 4 years, or how do you think about learning now after you've graduated from universities?
But yeah, I'd say, it's lifelong learning. I think we probably all agree with that. And, for me personally, like once I read this book and it just I caught what Nelson was trying to get in here about becoming your own banker, using dividend paying whole life to be your financial foundation, giving you a way to allow $1 to do multiple jobs. That just really, that expanded my mind, and I just can't get enough. So I think I can speak for us, all three of us, where every single day I am reading, listening, or watching something about infinite banking, whole life, how to properly structure it, how to use it, how to leverage it, how to best design it to help our clients. It's just a passion, and so it's like nonstop. So I'd say that hunger for learning is something that I would hope everybody would have. But I think maybe the key there is find something you're passionate about, and then that will just drive that desire. It's not work. It's fun. And it's really a lot of fun learning so I would say find your passion and go after that. If you don't quite know what your passion is, I would just say don't rush into something. Take a little bit if you have that opportunity. Just work, save up some money, and just maybe really kind of think about what your calling might be. And I think it's just wise, and like you said, John, just don't be a critical thinker. I think that's a big point to this whole book. It's change the way you think long term. When you know what's going on, you'll know what to do. that kind of thing. So it's really fits into that mindset of really kind of just think about it and just don't just go with the flow. Don't just automatically enroll yourself into a 401k. Maybe it's not the smartest thing to do. Maybe there's other options. And I just think that's really kind of one of the big takeaways in this section.
Yeah. And, something that's true about all three of us is we love learning so much that we, very similar, I guess, to paying for a college education. Like we are paying for our education through purchasing books, through, joining the Nelson Nash Institute and getting ourselves involved with a group where we can sharpen our understanding of the concept, have more access to resources, and just like Rob said, constantly learn. And I don't know any statistics behind this, but I would be very hard pressed to find just your standard cookie cutter, in anyone in their industry, whether it's like a property and casualty agent or another life insurance agent, who puts as much time and passion and dedication into what they do and actually like enjoy it and love it and want to continue to find the best way to serve, families and business owners, and that's something we just do naturally because it just makes sense, because that's just part of, like Rob was saying, our passion. And apart from IBC, investing in yourself, learning and loving the process of learning, I think should be just a standard. But far too often I find that, and this was kind of my defaults growing up, is that like learning was just a necessary evil, get an A on a test or to get, that degree or pass that class, rather than, wow, this is actually interesting information. This is something that can change the way I think about things, can change my understanding of human relationships or how I grow as a person. So yeah, to bring it full circle, just the lifelong enjoyment of learning, I think as soon as you find that, the doors open, your eyes are open to just so many things that you can grow in.
Yeah.
And when I think about learning and it being a lifelong venture, like I also, in order to do that, you need to be a lifelong reader. You need to be a lifelong writer. You need to be able to articulate what you're taking in order to educate yourself and to educate others. Yeah. And so there's just so many other skills that go with it. It's not just learning and only taking in. It's also being able to regurgitate that back out in some way, shape, or form. In this instance, we're doing it through video, through podcasts, through our online marketing and stuff like that, where we're trying to share a message. But these guys are lifelong committed readers and learners and are willing to sharpen themselves each and every day to help other people and to be able to communicate that as clearly as possible, which is, I'm grateful for you guys and thankful that I'm with you here. So before we move on, I want to talk about human capital a little bit more. This was an instance in this section that Nelson refers back to after some war veterans from World War II were coming back into civil society, where he basically says that the prominent idea back then was, hey, all of these veterans, all these soldiers, when they come back into our economy and come back into our workforce, it's going to shake up the economy so much that it's going to wreck it, which I think was such a faulty idea, because the skills and the knowledge and the know-how of people in your circle is the most important form of capital that you have. You've obviously heard that old adage, your network is your net worth. Well, your network is also your capital. That the people that you surround yourself with, what they know, how much they know, how they apply it, that's human capital. And that can be done in your business, or it can be done on a family scale, teaching and allowing each individual in your family to learn a particular skill set in order to help other people in their family. That's the form of family banking, if you will. Like that's real human capital. So I want to get your guys' take on that. How do you encourage human capital, that type of mentality for yourself in your family, in your circle of influence, your network? What are you guys doing to try to capture that?
I mean, for me, it's joining mastermind groups and getting myself out there to learn from people wiser than me, more experienced than me, who broaden my perspective. And if it's in a business context, I can understand. I think entrepreneurs in general are just so fascinating because they have this innate ability to see a problem and not necessarily monetize it, but turn it into a business proposition that can solve the problem and make money, which is just a wonderful thing that capitalism allows us to do. But yeah, so mastermind groups and getting involved with different business owners and also like faith-based groups and in our church and in our small groups, like being able to really dive deep and grow spiritually as well, I think is just a huge part of our overall, well-being as a person. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I just got to agree with John there. Just, being around other people that have similar passions and are, it's just learning from each other. It's really incredible when we have a group of people and all with kind of a like mindset, an entrepreneurial mindset, a skill set that are similar, just just by interacting with them, you can just learn so much about, oh, I never thought about that way, or, well, that's a smart way to do it, or yeah, just getting involved in those groups, just so valuable to that, just that, that intellectual capital that gets built, that network capital, that human capital. It's really, really key.
Yeah. Rob, as you were talking there, I was kind of thinking like, well, the 401k, the 401k has siloed people from each other to the sense of like, you're not learning how to build wealth from other individuals. You've basically restricted your wealth building venture from your network.
Right.
And people don't realize, like, because my money is just locked up there, it's just the way everybody else is doing it. There's, this is the only way to build wealth. You've basically locked yourself in a silo from everybody else and thinking of like, well, wait a minute, that intellectual capital that Rob was just talking about, how do I tap into that and his resources to maybe build wealth over here in a different way, potentially faster, potentially safer? Yeah, just like, what do you think the 401k has siloed people in that sense of like, you're not really developing that network with other individuals when it comes to wealth building?
Yeah. And to take it a step further, to think of it in this context, like you still actually are, even though you're siloed, you still are partnering with someone. It's just not with someone that you probably know or agreed to. It's the government, right? You are unknowingly or knowingly partnering with the government for your entire working years, hoping that you get a benefit. And the government knows they're getting a benefit from it. And yeah, you're instead of partnering with the government, who it has like over 100% debt to income ratio type of thing, and just lots of issues with at least, financial stewardship, you can partner with brilliant people who are able to build businesses and generate opportunities for people around them. That's a powerful partnership, in my opinion, compared to maybe a silent partnership with the government.
Yeah, and I'd say it kills entrepreneurship too, because you can't access that 401k cash. So you kind of like turn that, how like if you are actively thinking about something, reading about it, doing it, it fires up that part of your brain. Like when you just give your money to a money manager, you just turn off this whole idea. You just don't even think about like opportunities or things I could use with that cash, or you never interact with people who are coming up with bright ideas because you can't do anything with those ideas anyway. And so it just shuts off that whole part of your kind of financial intellectual brain. And you're just on autopilot, hoping it all turns out for the best in the end. And actually, I don't know if Derek, if you want to talk to it a little bit, but John, you're talking about like 401ks and qualified plans. You know, Derek, you just went through some training, some required training that we have to do to keep up our licensure. And you said you went through, I don't know how many hours of qualified plans, and why don't you just talk to that just for a second?
Yeah. So as Rob said, to keep your life insurance license with whatever state you're in, you have to do a certain amount of continuing education. Same goes for certified financial planner, other financial advisors, right? But with this, it was primarily focused in on retirement plans or qualified retirement plans. And just the amount of restrictions and hassles and taxes and penalties and fees that are boiled into these systems is just sickening. Like it was your money. And so now you're trying to shelter it from government taxes. But if you ever needed money for anything other than retirement after age, 59 and a half, you're going to be paying some sort of penalty, fee, or tax.
Mm-hmm.
And then add that on top of that, they don't want you to continue making intergenerational wealth. You have to liquidate those accounts. There's a required minimum distribution that the government doesn't really want you to pass along that wealth to your heirs, your successors. They want you to spend it down rather than help the next generation start off from a better point than you were, which is just so backwards from what I believe scripture has taught, and the implications of it, of leaving an inheritance for your children, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren. So so frustrating that, one, it's siloed you from thinking about building wealth with other people, right? God has made us to be human beings that live in community with others.
Mm-hmm.
And so your wealth shouldn't be jeopardized in that capacity, right? You should think about, how do I surround myself with people who are building wealth, a true wealth, outside of a 401k, and learn the skills that they're doing, because the vast majority of millionaires have amassed their wealth either in real estate or through their own business.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an overwhelming majority of those who are at the highest income levels or have the highest net worth. It's been through real estate and their own individual businesses rather than the stock market and the 401k.
Yeah.
So that's my
soapbox. That's a powerful way to put it there, Derek. Another thing I was thinking is the added costs and just more aspects to the nature of starting your adult life with piles of student debt.
Oh,
and I'm not going to get in the full tangent, but there's a very interesting podcast episode I listened to by an organization called Family Teams. I think that if you're at all interested in family dynamics, they're great. And they compare Rumpelstiltskin, the fairy tale, to, or they align it to, or put a parallel to modern day families.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not going to get in the full detail, but the point is, if you start your adult life out, you're 22 years old, and you have hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt, what's one of the most common things that we hear? We hear, well, maybe I'm not going to get married until I have this amount of student loan. Maybe you do then get married, and now you're working together with your spouse to pay off your student loans. What are some of the sacrifices that you're making, not just financially, but at a deeper philosophical, like family level? Like, is that debt affecting your decision to start your family, to maybe start trying to have children? Is it affecting your, say again?
Or your ability to buy a house.
Or to buy a house, yeah, or to really establish a generational, like, family, like, foundation that's strong, that's not subject to, bank, I hate to say it, like oppression almost, where your life now is guided in these really prime years of starting your family, maybe But I'm not saying everybody does this, and I'm not saying that's, 100% rate of people in their 20s are making those decisions or not making decisions because of debt. But it certainly is, and I've seen it over and over again. People delaying trying to have a family, maybe wanting to build their career so then they can finally pay off their student debt, XYZ. And that is just sinister, in my opinion, to have financial institutions influence, and the government, in my opinion, influence how families are formed. That's far beyond making money or passing generational wealth. That's at its core one of our fundamental enjoyments of life is being able to build our families and do that with freedom rather than with oppression from debt that we otherwise probably don't need, if we're being honest. There's my little soapbox on
Yeah, I just to add on to that real quick that I listened to that episode. Like it was really like if you're so saddled with debt that you can't start a family, I just thought that was an interesting parallel that debt has literally stolen your firstborn child.
Yeah.
Like your child could have been 10 years old if you were able to have a child 10 years earlier, but you couldn't because you had so much debt, you had to work. It's like, wow, that was like just pretty philosophical, like made me think about
Right.
what impact debt has on people's lives in a real, tangible, long-term, meaningful, negative, meaningful ways. It's really eye-opening when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. It's something to think about.
Or even your spouse's joy. Right?
Yeah.
I think about my wife. She loves to be home with our children and bringing them up right now, and they're at young ages where they couldn't be in public school or private school or anything like that. They're too young for that. But her life passion has been to be a stay at home, pouring into our kids. And if we had too much debt, there are many other people in that situation where they've got too much debt where their spouse has to work in order to pay off that debt.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're giving up potentially what they might see as their biggest passion and calling in life, which for my wife is to be a mom. She's thankfully not having to make those sacrifices because we're very smart about our debt. But for other people who are just drowning in student loan debt in particular, those are the sacrifices that you're making, right? You're giving up your firstborn child. You're giving up potentially being a homemaker, if that's what God has called you to. You're giving up your ability to maybe start your marriage, your relationship with your spouse, or maybe giving up the opportunity to purchase your first home or many other things, or start a business or whatever it might be, because you had taken on too much debt and now you need to service it. So when scripture talks about the borrower being slave to the lender, it's more than just the economics of it. You're giving up other things. You're sacrificing future things for the present satisfaction of paying for your education.
Right.
Yeah, so our last episode, I'm going to address just fathers and mothers, like to understand how you can really truly set your children up for success, with probably a little bit of a change to your spending habits or your cash flow. Please listen to our last episode and you can truly like give your children a gift beyond reason. Honestly, like something that I can't imagine that I would have received at age 21 or 22. So
Yeah.
it's vitally important.
All right, guys, any other closing thoughts here for this week's episode?
No, I think we ended off at a good spot.
All right. Well, guys, thank you very much. I appreciate you both. And to our listeners, if you're interested in learning how to become your own banker, you can reach out to us at thefamilybankingshow@gmail.com. And we'd love to sit down with you and discuss how this can be implemented into your financial picture. As John has just described, it could be as simple as just changing a few dollars worth of your cash flow each and every month to help setting yourself and your future generations up for success. Guys, we will see you in the next episode.
Sounds good. See you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us.
If you're interested in a conversation about anything we've discussed, you can find our contact information in the show notes below.
And subscribe, follow, and leave a review to help spread this message and to help families across the country discover the generational blessing of IBC. May God bless you, and we'll see you next time.